Hello and a very warm welcome to you. My name is Ray Lavery.
My name is Jessica Crooks.
And together we manage and run Trans Matters Worldwide and Trans London Meetup Group.
We do in-person events and online events once or twice a month. And right now we're hoping to move into webinars. We're bringing in experts and trying to educate.
That's it. And so originally this channel was actually my female to male transition line, but we have upgraded it from there. And as Jess has said, what we are going to do is we are going to do all things transgender. So there'll be fresh webinars, there'll be fresh interviews, there'll be some fun stuff if we can think about it and just record it, and things just to keep you occupied and have some fun and help you along your transgender journey. So to make sure that you don't miss out on anything, all you have to do is hit the subscribe button, and that way you will get all of the notifications of what we have coming up and you won't miss out on anything. So enjoy that, and we will see you in there. So take care and goodbye. Okay, hello and a very warm welcome to you to another webinar. I can't believe we've been flown through these, but this is our fourth in a series of four with the wonderful Stephen Davidson from the London Trans Choir. He has been incredibly patient with us and given us a lot of his time and his of course wisdom and experience. And Stephen, well, we can't tell you how much this means to us that you're doing this. So thank you so much for that. Before we kind of get cracking, I just with a small amount of household rules. And Jess will probably fix this now in a second. If you have any questions or if you need to ask anything or any comments, please put them in the chat or put them in the Q&A. If you are watching this on the YouTube channel, please put your questions in the comments below and we will get to them from there, okay? And I guess that's kind of it. So hello again. My name is Ray Lavery, and with me I have the wonderful Jess Crooks. Together we run the Trans London Meetup Group and also Trans Matters Worldwide. And we are doing all kinds of interviews on trans subjects. And I can't tell you how excited we were when we basically came across Stephen a while ago. Was, oh my God, there's somebody who can help us with our vocal training who's also trans and a singing coach as well. Like this can't be real. And it turns out it is real, and an international one at that. And so when we approached Stephen and he said yes, we were absolutely thrilled, because we know what a big topic this is. Now, we've already been through the MTF, the FTM, and the non-binary. And today, I think this is right, Stephen, we're going to concentrate on sort of troubleshooting and vocal health care or care of your voice. Am I right? This is today's subject? Yes, that is today's subject. Super stuff. Okay, brilliant. So that's what we're going to be covering. So it'll just help you, I guess, tweak from all of the different webinars that we've done. Now, if this is the first time watching this webinar, be aware that those other webinars are there and they're full of all kinds of amazing detailed tips, techniques, tricks, all of that kind of stuff, and how to get the most from your voice, no matter which direction you are going in the trans world. So that is all there for you. Stephen, do you want me to do a quick introduction of yourself? Kind of already have, but do you want to take over and I guess maybe tell everybody a little bit about yourself and what you do and so on, so that they're just, they know more about you than I do then. This will be better.
Well, I think you've covered it. I'm a vocal coach. I work mostly with trans and non-binary people. I've been doing it for a good number of years now, and I conduct London Trans Choir. That's the long and the short of it.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. And all amazing stuff. So super stuff. Okay. Well, how do you want to handle today? Or have your presentation? Are we just going to chat through, or what were your thoughts?
I do not have a slideshow because
Okay.
I tend to do this more one-on-one.
Okay.
So I'd love to invite any questions that people might have about vocal healthcare. This is a great time. I've got a little bit of stuff to say about some common causes of issues and what you can do about it yourself. But I would also love to start by saying, if you think there is something wrong with your voice, it doesn't feel right, you shouldn't be in a webinar. You should be asking your doctor about it. So this is very much basic level troubleshooting. Not medical advice. If something hurts, please go ask a doctor. Cool.
Okay. Perfect.
That's my spiel. So these, none of these are specific to trans voice, but a lot of them come up more often with us because we're asking more of our voices, particularly if we're changing the register that we're speaking in. It's a little bit more work. It's easy to do wrong. So the number one cause of vocal difficulties that you might have is just going to be tension. So there's a fine line between using a muscle and clenching a muscle, and it can be really hard to find the difference. My tips for that: number one, do a really thorough stretch warm up. You can see some of those in past videos. Have a little look. The deconstriction exercise with the straw and the water, I believe we mentioned it in the Trans Mask Masterclass, but as a recap, you get a nice thick straw, like a boba tea straw, a half full glass of water. You first just blow some bubbles, make sure the water isn't going to spray everywhere, and then you're just going to sing a low note into that straw to blow bubbles like a foghorn, just, and it helps push a little bit this open just there in the larynx. It's a really great exercise if you've got any kind of tension or fatigue, and it's one that's often used by speech language therapists and ENTs.
Can you just remind me again, when you're doing that, how does that release the tension though?
It puts air pressure back this way because there's resistance in the straw when you're singing.
Okay, and so it releases the tension. Because so am I right in saying that when you've got tension, what's actually happening is you're kind of clenching, like, well, I think I do this all the time, by the way. This has been very, very relevant for me, where everything feels kind of tight, but it also feels like I'm kind of pushing up on something here, and it's not going. It's like hitting a brick wall. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, often. So a lot of the time, that's specifically the base of our tongue tends to really overwork, and we tend to squeeze our vocal folds together a little bit too firmly, particularly if we're trying to project, put a lot of volume behind our voice, or if we're working to change our register. We can also sometimes overuse the muscles that surround our voice and end up with just a bit of tension and fatigue.
Okay. All right. Okay. And so that will kind of reset it while you're doing that. But what can you do to continue to sort of reset it? I mean, I don't think anybody's going to walk around with sort of a straw in a glass, but like if you're just out on your date, well, you would, or your bottle of water or something like that. I mean, I guess that could kind of work as well. But like, so if you don't have one of those handy where you are, what would be the next best thing to do?
A good stretch goes a really long way. So I think we did in the Trans Mask one, we did some shoulder rolls and a neck stretch. We gave our jaw a little massage. We gave the base of our tongue a little squeeze. We had a nice tongue stretch. We did some big yawns. All of that can be really good. If you're finding that you've got fatigue to the point of pain on a regular basis, absolutely check in with someone who can listen to your voice and help you diagnose what might be happening there, particularly if you're changing your voice, because whether we're raising or lowering pitch or doing anything else to our voice, it shouldn't be physically exhausting. If it is, you're doing something wrong. Right,
probably trying to force air, if you like, through. It kind of feels to me like you're forcing air through a very small hole, if that's the right way, because I guess while you're using the straw just to sort of calm that one down a little bit, which is going to cause pressure.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. So stretching under the tongue, jaw, next, and basically just give yourself a chance to relax. I guess the more relaxed your entire body is, the more all this tension here is going to disappear.
Yes, everything is attached. It's a very holistic thing.
Yeah, of course.
For better and worse.
Okay.
I've sort of seen sort of in my friend group that can have sort of a knock-on effect as well. I think if someone's having a bit of a rough time, having a bit of a bad day, sometimes that's not the time for vocal training. You can definitely bring that into whatever you're doing, can't you?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, if you think about if you're upset or crying, that feeling of a lump in your throat, it's it's something squeezing, and you absolutely shouldn't try to push through it. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, that is
Okay.
a really good point.
That's the time to
Um,
relax and stuff. And I have to say, I'm definitely very naughty on this one. I was going to use an Irish term, which no one will get, but you know, so that I'm always fairly fast moving myself, and I'm always sort of speaking quickly and stuff like that. And that's kind of even sitting here, I can kind of feel it a little bit. I can even see well, that's like the vein popping out here and stuff like that. And that would certainly say that there's a lot of tension going on there, right? So
yeah, yeah.
time to get into the Zen.
Have a couple of big yawns. See if you can leave the back of your tongue relaxed after. It might help. It might help.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, it's if it's happening regularly, it's a habit thing, or perhaps you're someone who uses their voice a lot, like if you're a lecturer or an actor or something, you might just have loads of work that your voice is doing, in which case, oh boy, does your technique need to be on point.
Right.
Right. So the number one thing that I see causing people difficulties is just muscular tension around their voice. So that's a great thing to check in with, especially if you've recently made a big change. It might have been a bit much too fast. Um, the second thing that often plagues us is just dehydration. Um, and I know it sounds very, very boring. We've all been told a million times to drink water. But our vocal folds have skin on them really similar to what's on the inside of our mouth. And you know that feeling when it gets dry, it gets really kind of tacky and gross. And if we're forcing those together hundreds of times a minute, they just get really irritated and our vocal folds can become inflamed. Sometimes we can even get nodules or other issues like that purely because of chronic dryness. And I mentioned this specifically in a trans class because a lot of the things that particularly trans femme folk might be taking are very drying to the voice. So read the packages on all of your meds. Also, stuff like antihistamines and like lots of really common medicines are drying. So it's easy not to notice and then to think, oh, why does my voice feel so bad?
Okay.
So obviously, number one, drink lots of water. It's good advice for lots of reasons besides your voice. But something that we do a lot of the time, if we're using our voice a lot, is to steam our vocal folds. Because obviously, if you swallow water, it goes down the other tube. It's not actually touching your vocal folds because they're the entrance to our lungs. But if you inhale steam, that water does go directly to your vocal folds. So if you're feeling a bit dry, that can be a really good way forward. If you'd like to try it, you can try at home. Just boil a little pan of water on the stove, let it cool down for a couple minutes. We're not here to scald ourselves. And then make a little tent for yourself with a tea towel. Breathe it for a few minutes, like when you were a kid and you had a cold. If you feel like that helps your voice, you can also buy little portable steamers on Amazon for like £4 or £5. They just look like little sippy cups. You'll find a lot of professional voice users do it constantly because if you speak for a long time, you dry out. It's unavoidable, and that's a great way to rehydrate really quickly.
Okay, and would I suppose an alternative to that, if you don't have that, is maybe one of those like hard-boiled sweets that you could just sort of pop in. You know, the way that always makes you salivate, and therefore there's a lot more fluid, if you like, in your mouth. I know it's more saliva
Not
than anything
quite.
else, but would that help?
No, because if it's just liquid in your mouth and you swallow it, it's still going down the same tube. It's still not getting
Right.
directly to your vocal folds. And a lot of the sort of like vocal zone or throat sweets can have some alcohols or minty things that are actively drying and bad.
Okay.
Alas.
So no to that one.
C'est la vie.
Shame. Just an opportunity to eat
Yep.
sweets, really. So,
Sorry. You're allowed to eat sweets. Don't let me stop
yeah,
you.
but just not for hydration purposes. I mean, oh well,
No.
super slow.
Steam's a great idea, though. I'd never heard of
I
that.
mean, if you want,
Yeah.
yes, warmly recommend. It's one of those things that it helps a lot of people, and also if you're not someone it helps, you've lost absolutely nothing by trying. You just inhaled some steam and it was free and fine.
Yeah.
So
Would this
warmly
be the same
recommend.
like as a sinus steam inhaler, like that type of a thing?
Yeah, really similar. Or if you have like a facial mister, that'll do the same thing.
Okay.
If you want to
Okay.
have a little look on Amazon and really splash out, you can get all kinds of fancy vaporizers. But it's just water vapor at the end of the day.
Right. Okay. All right.
Interesting.
Super. Okay. That is good advice. I think I'm gonna have to, you know what? I'm gonna have to, I know what the end is, I'm gonna have to take all your advice on everything. I know that for a fact, because I know I'm suffering from most of those things, everything you just mentioned so far. That's me. And if it's me, then it's other people too.
Yes, it's a lot of people.
Yeah.
And the third thing that I see a lot with people is just stuff irritating their voice. So a big culprit is acid reflux. I'm sure you can imagine if there's acid coming up from your stomach and burning your vocal folds, of course that is very bad for them. But a lot of people have something called silent reflux, where you only get it when you're lying down. So usually when you're asleep, and people don't always notice that they have it because they're asleep at the time. But if you wake up and need to cough all the time, it's a really good indication that you might have some silent reflux going on. In which case, I mean, objectively, you should probably see somebody about it. But you can have a go with like some Rennies or something, just as an experiment, see if it helps. Yeah. Also things like smoking and etc. Bad news.
Well, or perhaps
It's
living
not
in
good for it.
London, or
Yeah.
I guess pollen count at this time of year and stuff
Yeah.
like that as well will all play a part in it.
Yeah. All of that. And stuff like eating foods that you're intolerant to. A lot of people, dairy affects their voice. It's not everyone, so this is not saying absolutely no milk for you, but if it makes you feel a bit mucusy, that's probably a sign it's affecting your voice.
Okay. All right. All right.
I'm similarly affected, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But milk is
Yeah.
delicious.
It's so
It's a shame.
disappointing.
It's a
I
shame.
know, right? Ice
More the cheese
cream.
than the milk, though, isn't it? For me, but
Both.
yeah, I get it. Yeah, you got it. Okay. So,
There.
relax, drink water,
Mhm.
get rid of any sort of
Yes.
irritations that you have as best as you can, and that'll really help things, And I guess your first point there
Yes.
so far was that if you have something, if your voice is very sore and it's sore for an ongoing period of time, really this is beyond the scope of vocal training. You need to get it checked out.
Yeah, if you've got ongoing pain, if you're constantly losing your voice, if your vocal range has reduced and that's
Mm,
not come back for a while, some of this could just be like lingering effects of a virus. So if you've been sick recently, give it some time. But
mm.
yeah, vocal pain, losing your voice, hoarseness, lots of fry coming into your voice that you can't make it go away. Those are all signs that something might be up.
Mm. Okay. All right. Well, all good to know. Okay. What else have you noticed, or I guess where have people struggled with their voice? I mean, that was just sort of like, that stuff is kind of general, but when you see people coming in and they're trying the exercises that you have tried, even as maybe we just try like from the MTF point of view, first of all. So they're trying to get a little bit higher, they know that they're not going to be able to project as much as they want. You gave us loads of tips that, I think that was that the little dog trick? Was that one?
Big dog, little dog.
Big dog, little dog. Yeah. So that was the one. Can you actually just, because I'm not going to explain it very well, and obviously you're the expert on that, but just very quickly, because I know we have a few new people who will be watching this.
For sure. So the big dog, little dog thing is to think about the size of our vocal tract, how we're shaping everything from our lips all the way back down to our throat. So if you try first thinking about a big dog and how it would pant, you might find yourself making loads of space all the way back. You might find yourself using lots of warm air. Probably the back of your tongue has gone down a bit. And if you speak with that kind of setting, you might find your sound is a little lower, but also darker and rounder. And likewise, if you think about a little dog, how it might pant, you're probably using colder, faster air. You probably lifted your tongue up, and probably the space all the way down here is a little bit smaller. And if you think about speaking with everything kind of in that setting, you might notice the pitch go up a little bit, but you might also hear a much brighter sound, if that makes sense. Broadly speaking, brighter, lighter sounds will read more feminine, and darker, rounder sounds will read more masculine, depending on your language and accent, etc.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a good one. So
That's a good one.
I think the most common mistake I see with trans femme folk, there's a lot of videos on the internet using something called the swallow method, which it is a thing, but it's not for this, whereby you swallow and then try to keep your larynx all the way up there while you're speaking. And for the vast majority of people, it's wildly too much. And if you try to hold your larynx as high as you can constantly, you'll get really reduced vocal function. You'll have, I'm going to do it just for a second, you'll have a really, really bright, buzzy tone, which is not inherently bad, but it's important to be able to turn stuff like that on and off because it will be really tiring for your voice.
Kind of sounded like you were on
And folks who
helium.
do that for a long time.
Yeah.
Pardon?
You said it kind of sounded like you were on helium, like it had that kind of a sound to it.
Yeah. Which, if you want to use that method, I would do it with a speech language therapist because it was not intended for voice feminization. It has slightly been co-opted, and because you can do it so badly and hurt yourself really noticeably, I would just stay away from it unless a professional has told you to do that, because that's one that can really easily go badly at home. A lot of these muscles end up tensed and clenched, and we get a really restricted voice from that. So that's my number one. Don't do that tip for trans femme folk.
So, but is the little dog, big dog? It's different. Like you're placing the tongue, not the larynx, in that scenario.
They're attached, but the little dog will be a slight lifting of our larynx. Broadly speaking, the lower your voice, the lower your larynx tends to sit. So the shorter or longer, and the higher your voice, the higher the larynx tends to sit. So we get like a shorter or longer tube here to use for resonance. If you think about like a slide trombone, so it does go up and down, but it should move up and down freely. We don't want to lock it in anywhere. That's all.
Can I ask before we get too far away from that? So similarly to the swallow method, is there anything that you've sort of, had people come into your session, any sort of bad advice that they've picked up around the web somewhere that, maybe you probably wouldn't recommend? What are the sort of common things that you hear often?
That's the biggest one. I do sometimes hear folks saying it should take you this long to achieve your voice, and that's also very dangerous advice because we all start from very different places. Some people it's going to take 2 years, some people it's going to take half an hour. Depends what your skill set and starting voice was. So I think that's also dangerous because people try to do too much too fast and they don't have the muscular control or awareness to make it happen correctly. Yeah. I think I've probably mentioned this in previous webinars, but something that's really key to vocal training is proprioception and interoception. So those are our senses that tell us where our body bits are and what they're up to without us having to look at them. And you'll be deeply unsurprised to know that statistically trans people struggle with that, because I mean, firstly, there's an obvious coping mechanism of just like thinking of ourselves as a brain in a jar and not engaging. But also, a lot of neurodivergent folk statistically struggle with those senses, and we know there's a huge overlap between our communities. Uh, so I think it's important when we're learning a new thing to give ourselves the time to mentally check into all of these muscles and feel what they're doing, and keep working on those circuits, if that makes sense. Because a lot of people injure themselves because they didn't notice it happening until it really hurt. Yeah.
Right. And then basically until something got broken, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a very common experience for people in our community to just ignore irritating little things until it's suddenly a big thing. And then we're like,
Right.
oh no,
Okay.
when did that happen?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And I guess, with what you were saying there, really is the thing is not to try and force anything, is to give yourself time, which is always a big thing in transition anyways, is we always want to rush to the final hurdle, or past that final hurdle, but in actual fact, time is your best friend. And the more that you sort of implement things sort of like one on top of another, rather than trying to do 5 different things at the same time, which is frankly impossible to integrate for anybody, because it takes a long time to rebuild the muscle memory, so to speak.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And I think just if you imagine your larynx, so the bit of cartilage where your voice uh, box is, it lives in basically a cage of muscles. There's one little bone in there called the hyoid bone. It's the only bone in your body that's not attached to any other bones. It's just a linchpin to work all sorts of different muscles. And it's just surrounded by tiny little muscles that keep it in its spot. And we can move it. It goes up and down, and we can move it back and forth, and it tilts forward and backwards. Because there's so many little muscles there, and because we almost never think about them, they've just got default settings. And we can change those default settings. But in the same way that you wouldn't get off your couch and run a marathon, it takes a second. Do it bit by bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that is actually a large part of it as well. People think, well, it's just my voice. But in actual fact, it's quite a complex system. There's lots of little things going on in there. And they all sort of obviously they all interact with each other, but they're all connected in a way that, most of us never think of our voice. We just have a voice, I use it, I talk, that's it. I don't think about it. And it's mad that,
Yeah.
in order to make these changes, you kind of have to bring yourself to a position where you are now thinking about your voice. You're listening to yourself as you're thinking about your voice, turning that into muscle memory, and then letting go of all of that stuff so that it becomes natural.
Yeah.
That
It's
is
a lot.
that is an insane moment whenever you start vocal therapy, isn't it? In terms of like, oh, this is how I interface with the rest of the world. This is physically how I communicate with other people. Oh, it's maybe much bigger than I thought it was.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a whole discipline and craft.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Super. And so what about, going the other direction then? So what would be, I guess, let's go for the bad advice then that you just talking about if you're, trying to lower your voice, are there some things out there that are actually quite dangerous for people to attempt to do, or, maybe would damage their voices over time?
Um, I feel like the best advice I can give for trans mask folk and vocal health is just to chill out. Because number one, we get a lot of tension, and our voices are very affected by tension. Um, and because of that muscle memory thing, when our voices were higher, all of this wanted to be smaller because that was the most acoustically efficient thing to do. A high voice wants a small space to live in, and a lower voice wants a bigger space to live in,
Mm.
just because of physics. And a lot of us, we keep everything in the spot where it was before. So this is about where all of my muscles sat when I was a soprano. And it's not a bad voice, but you can kind of hear there's a slight buzz to it. It's a very distinctive tone, which I think a lot of us will recognize. Um, And that comes just from not adapting, not letting this sink down. And it's really just consciously relaxing all of these muscles and letting your voice sit where it wants to. There's a lot less making things happen with transmasc voice. It's more unlearning what we were doing before.
Right.
Does that
Yeah,
make
no, I
sense?
get that because it is it is a big habit, and it's kind of funny that like you sometimes you know when you listen to yourself you go, oh yeah, okay, that sounds a lot deeper than it did a long time ago, and it does, but then you forget about it, and maybe the worst thing you can do is hear yourself on a recording because they're always way more trebly than you actually sound in the real world, which upsets everybody. And so the same on the
Yeah,
phone as well. In fact, a lot of
yeah,
us don't get misgendered on the phone because of that treble sound, that just the way that the speakers work on a telephone, just annoying, but the way that it
yeah,
is. But having said that, you do find yourself defaulting back to that, the way the voice used to work. And I never really thought about it until we started doing these webinars, of course, because it was just kind of like, well, the team will take care of it. But in actual fact, there's quite a lot that you can actually do to improve things. And, as you had said before, that lowering the back of the tongue, I think is an absolutely huge one. And if you just remember that one thing, that sort of opens up that space,
yeah.
whereas but you need to be conscious of it in order to be able to do that. And I know I'm terrible, but I don't forget, you know.
Yeah.
So that's a very big one as well. Um, is there anything? I mean, I was going to say non-binary because you have people who were assigned male at birth and assigned female at birth. It can be very, very difficult. But is there kind of did we discuss sort of like a neutral kind of a tone, or is that possible? Not a pitch. We know that that's different, but the actual sort of in between the two. Is there a way? Is there a way to control this tongue? I suppose to kind of halfway between the two, because it's easy to imagine something at the ceiling and down below, but not so easy to imagine something in the middle.
Yeah, absolutely. I sometimes think of all the different vocal qualities being on like a big mixing board with sliders. So we
Yeah.
can change pitch and we can change how bright or dark our resonance is. We can change how much twang we're putting into our voice, whether it's a really dark, twangless sound or like North American levels of buzz kind of twang. We can change whether we're emphasizing important words with volume or pitch. We can change lots of things. We can change how hard our consonants are, how long our vowels are, uh, the range of pitch that we use expressively while we're speaking.
And actually,
Yeah,
it reminds me, you were talking about how people end sentences, that you were saying people who are more, feminine tend to sort of go up at the end of a sentence where, it's more of a sort of an evener tone. Am I remembering this correctly? You're going to go, no, that was rubbish,
you're
Ryan. It's not
halfway there.
halfway
So
there.
it
Right?
tends to be more the important words of a sentence that we'll lift up for or
Mm.
use a punch of volume. Um, so, for example, a masculine sounding voice might use a little punch of volume to emphasize the more important words of a sentence, whereas a feminine sounding voice might use a lift in pitch to emphasize the important words in a sentence.
Okay,
If you
that's what
go
it
up at the
was.
end of every sentence, you'll just sound Australian.
Or like you're asking a question on it.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
super. All right. So,
gorgeous. Uh, yes, those are my common troubleshooting things. I've got 10 minutes if anyone has questions, but it's also fine if you don't.
yeah, okay. I
We
do
do
see
have a
something
question.
pop up there. Go for it, Jess.
Sure. So, Rose says, I'm sorry if this is repeating. Any advice for softening consonants, as that's where I get feedback all the time. All I know is to make the S's more aspirated.
Hmm. Um, okay, my first bit of advice is to buy a book called One Weird Trick. It's a guide to trans voice. And I say that one specifically because it's got a lot of exercises around that specific thing. The whole second half is things to say out loud and different stuff to focus on whilst you're saying each thing. Broadly, if our consonants are a little bit too hard, it's that we're using the tongue a bit too muscularly to make them happen. So I would say find a couple of nice, simple sentences to just say on a loop. And as you're saying them, focus maybe first on the tip of your tongue and on any time it makes contact with something, making it clearly but lightly, just the very tip. And then see if you can take the same feeling to sounds that close at the back, like k and g. Can you do them a little bit more gently? K, g. And can you experiment with specifically where your tongue is making contact? So for a k or a g, it might be right up by your hard palate. It might be right back in your throat. For like a t kind of sound, it could be right behind your teeth, or it could be up on your hard palate, anywhere in that kind of neighborhood. Play around with specifically where you're making that contact and see what it sounds like.
Okay. And then just sort of like practice to soften that, you know, just when you say soften, does that mean, you know, more or less just speak more soft, so like lower the volume type of a thing?
So if I really overemphasize all of my consonants, you can kind of hear that there's a bit more of a harshness to my voice. And if I really soften them, you'll hear a lot more of the vowels, and the voice kind of is a little bit more unified. Does that make sense?
Well, I can hear it. I can hear what I can hear what you're doing. I'm not sure how easy it is to replicate that though.
Well, all things with practice.
Okay, all right. So does that mean to say then, you know, to put more emphasis on your consonants then, would just sound more male maybe, without having to increase the volume? Because when we were talking earlier about sort of that hose pipe, the air going through a hose pipe, that this would be a good way to solve that problem.
They're not quite the same thing, but sometimes when we change one thing, others follow naturally, if that makes sense. So you're talking about tension back here, and when we're thinking about consonants, we're thinking more about how this bit of our tongue moves to speak.
Okay, all right. I think I get where you're coming from on that. I think these are one of these things where you kind of have to stand and, you know, and just practice it and listen and just see what you can hear and really just play around with it a little bit, really, isn't it?
Yes, very much. It's yeah. It's a very experimental type of process. When I'm working with people one-to-one, I try to be very sort of led by getting them to feel what they feel and notice what they notice, because there is no one correct way to do any of this. And I can certainly say broadly, this is the cloud of things that will read more masculine, and this is the cloud of things that will read more feminine. But it really depends what people want to sound like.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So it can be a little bit of both, really, in that as well, you know? Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. So there was another question there, but because it was dealing with pain, yes, has dealt with it because it was the first thing that you said was that there was, you know, if you've got some serious pain, you need to sort that out by a doctor, you know, and you know, and can I ask another question in here, because we've been talking about the sound, the resonance. Can we talk about the volume thing for a second? You know, how do you do the volume thing without forcing that much extra air through that hose pipe, which of course if you did would strain the voice and give you pain?
Yeah, a lot of people, when they try to do things louder with their voice, they squeeze here to try to make it happen, and they just end up sounding really strained. And unfortunately, I'm not somewhere where I can shout because I'll be possibly, I'm already disturbing people, but I'm not going to push my luck. When we're thinking about making a loud noise, we want to open here and push with our tummy muscles to get the air support, and that air is what's going to make the big volume.
Okay, so are you talking about sort of like from the diaphragm? So taking a deeper breath and then releasing that air more slowly. Is that what you mean? Or just because again, if you just breathe out fast, that's going to cause that tension.
Mm. We want a steady, controlled stream of air. So I'm not at my house, so I don't have any. But if you grab a little square piece of paper, hold it up against the wall, blow in the center of it, and try to hold it there with just your breath. That's a really good example of about the air pressure you should have for a standard speaking or singing voice. And if you want to work on projecting and shouting, it's all of these muscles down here. It's diaphragm support. It's taking big breath. It's using your tummy muscles at the front and the sides and around your lower back to push that air out with a bit more pressure. Did I show you my picture of Pingu?
We did see Pingu, all right, yeah. We did. I think in the first
Pingu is
one
my
we saw
very
Pingu.
favorite. That's my favorite example of how to make a big sound, because when he wants to make a really loud sound, he takes a big breath. And you can see his little tummy goes in because he's pushing it with his tummy, and his whole beak just becomes a little trumpet. So he's opening this up just to be like a resonance chamber, and he's doing all of the work with his tummy muscles. So very excellent, excellent going from
And with
Pingu.
that as well,
Also,
I
any
mean,
animal, if it's making a lot of noise.
right. Okay, fair enough, fair enough. And what about, the thing is if you're breathing more in, does that kind of change, not the structure of a sentence, obviously, but I mean, would it be worth doing, I guess, breathing exercises to enable yourself to get you, like we all tend, most of us tend to be top lung breathers. I think the majority of people are. And that's not a good place to be because obviously, number one, you've a lot less air in there. So you've got to make that bit of that air work really, really hard. So what about like, I guess, kind of reaching or being more aware of, breathing exercise that would bring a lot more air into your lungs and use more of your actual lungs, more capacity within your lungs?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a few exercises for that we did in the Transmask class that are uh, particularly relevant to us because of binder use, but absolutely work for everyone. So have a little listen to that class, even if it doesn't apply to you.
Okay. And anything quick that we can do here? Because I know we're kind of already coming close to time on that sort of.
Sure. Grab a book or laptop or tablet or
Yeah.
something of similar weight. Lie down flat on your back. Put the book on your belly button and practice breathing in, pushing the book up, and breathing out, pulling it down.
Okay.
That's
So a
number
nice little
one.
visual cue there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. When
Okay.
we're breathing fully, it uses all of these muscles, but just at the front there is a great way to just get started finding those muscles. Yeah.
Okay. That will work. That will work. Okay. Great. So basically, lots to think about, just even in that sort of like quick, almost like a Q&A type of a scenario. There's an awful lot. So don't force your voice. If there's any real pain, go to a doctor. Or if you're trying to raise your voice, think about raising like less space in here. So raising the tongue up, which the larynx will go up, but don't try and force it up there, that swallow thing. And then if you want more, drop the back of the tongue down, which creates the resonance of the area. We also talked about the softening of the consonants and the vowels as well. And then we just had some breathing there, some breathing exercise that will help you to gain more volume, I suppose, or easier to speak. Have I missed something in there? Was that a fairly quick recap?
I think you're good. I think you're good.
Yeah.
Also, stay hydrated.
Stay hydrated.
Maybe
Very
ponder your
important.
relationship with dairy.
Stay hydrated. Stay hydrated. Okay, super. All right, we've got that. So, look,
Right.
Stephen, thank you so much for that. I know we guys, we had to end a little bit early today just because of Stephen's commitments. But what we've done today has just literally been a very quick sort of like troubleshoot. We have a lot more detail in the other webinars where Stephen has done presentations. He's gone through lots of exercises. like, there's an enormous amount of detail and a lot of questions that people ask live on those webinars as well. And again, for a lot of the questions that we've seen on the Q&A, because I've seen Jess has been busy, you know what I mean, answering those on there. Make sure that you check those out, because they are there. And if if you're not sure where they are, in fact, what I'm going to do, because you're probably going to be watching this on YouTube now, is we're going to put the links in the description to those different webinars for you, so that you can see that. If you're in the trial group, just email us, we'll tell you, we'll let you know, and you can have that there. Stephen, thank you so much. Thank you so much. My God, you have so much knowledge. People, believe you me, people have been talking about you. It's been in our meetings, people have been talking about how they've watched the webinars and used the advice that you've done, and how it's just making them feel a lot calmer and a lot more in control of how their voice is actually sounding, which is brilliant, because let's be honest, all of this is to, relieve the dysphoria that we're all under on this one. So it's incredibly helpful. You are one fantastic guy, and you've given us a lot of time. And we really do appreciate that. So thank you so much. So look, if you're watching this, sorry, Steve, you're about to say something there.
Oh, just that I need to pop off, but thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for having me. So look, again, if you want to get in touch with Stephen, you just need to literally Google the London Trans Choir, and he will come up there. And if you're a little bit stuck, just either put a comment on the video comments, or get in touch with myself and Jess, and we will put you in touch with Stephen, because he's really, really good. There's only so much he can cover in a webinar. And if you need something that is, personally for you, we do highly recommend that you go to see him. There's very few people who do this type of work and who are as experienced, and not just experienced, who have lived this. And that is a very, very big thing. So there we have it. I think that's us for tonight. Jess, is there anything that you wanted to add? Or
No, you're all good. Thank you so much for coming, everyone.
Thank you so much for coming. And so look, I did see a quick question there, but yes, okay, very good on that one there. So look, enjoy yourself, whatever else you're doing this evening or today or tomorrow or whenever you're watching this webinar. And thank you so much for joining us. Do stay in touch, because we've loads more stuff coming up. And until then, we will see you next time. So take care and goodbye, everybody.
Thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe just so you won't miss out on anything we do. Thanks so much.
Bye.